BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, today is Friday, another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. You will notice from the title of this episode that I will be discussing the book Motor Spirit by Jarett Kobek, but it is part 2. However, if you haven't heard part 1 yet, that's fine, you can keep listening. I always want these book discussions, or any of the ongoing series on this channel, to be available as standalone episodes, or you can listen to them as part of a group. However, with Motor Spirit, I have a lot of conflicting feelings. There are parts of the book that I like, and there are parts of the book that I do not. And if you didn't hear part 1 yet, I will definitely just give us the smallest bit of recap. There are scenes that have been recreated that Jarett Kobek shouldn't have the ability to do so, particularly the Lake Herman Road murders, talking about the activities of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, who were murdered by the Zodiac Killer on December 20th of 1968. However, there were no eyewitnesses, so I think he's using too much imagination in those particular scenarios. But as the book continues on toward the end, there are also a lot of bizarre twists and turns in Jarett Kobek's story. Motor Spirit is advertised as a Zodiac book, and there's even a recreation or imitation of a Zodiac letter on the cover of the book, and it gets people's attention for sure. But there are so many deviations from the story because this book is filled with descriptions of Charles Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders, but also the moon landing, Ronald Reagan as the governor of California, and it contains many pages are devoted to things that are not Zodiac related at all. And part of me thinks that this book, called Motor Spirit, as opposed to something about the Zodiac Killer, would have been so much better if it had been advertised as a book about the 1960s and early 70s, perhaps some type of unofficial history guide to the late 60s and early 70s. And I know that doesn't sound as catchy when you're trying to promote a book, and it really does appear that Jarett Kobek is a writer who has covered numerous other subjects. If you Google him, one of his titles that will come to the top is a book called I Hate the Internet, and they've been translated into other languages. So he seems like somewhat of a prolific writer who wanted to explore not only the Zodiac Killer mystery, but as I said, just talking about the 1960s and 70s in America, particularly some stories of California. And I don't know if it's the strongest presentation, but the reason why is because, have you ever heard of the expression, he is a tourist in someone else's industry? And I don't think that Jarett Kobek, author of Motor Spirit, has demonstrated the strongest knowledge and understanding of the true crime world. But more importantly about this particular story, I think that this book is going to have to go into the category of I read it, so you don't have to. And there are other people that I would put on that list. Gary Stewart, author of The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Lyndon Lafferty, author of The Zodiac Killer Cover-Up, also known as The Silenced Badge. but for a very different reason. Those guys are blatant frauds, especially Gary Stewart. With Lyndon Lafferty, he did some of the things that I will accuse Kobek of, recreating situations and scenarios which he could not have possibly been a part of and presenting them as facts, but also just not having the biggest understanding of the material. Now, Gary Stewart and Lafferty are worse because Lyndon Lafferty presents himself as a on-the-ground investigator who followed the events for 35 years and then wrote what Henry Kissinger would call a pock of slimy lies. And then Gary Stewart was trying to tell a story about his biological father being the Zodiac, which was almost certainly false. He was called falsifying documents by the FX documentary, which you can watch on Hulu for free, and listen to my response here on BBOR. And as always, like and subscribe to follow along with these true crime discussions. But with Jarett Kobek, I don't think he is fraudulent. I want to be very clear about that. I have not seen anything in this book that would suggest that he is a fraud. And he has another book out called How to Find Zodiac, but this one, Motor Spirit, which talks about the motor spirit, the nasty vibes of the 1960s. So you can see why I was suggesting that it would have succeeded better if he just had a Zodiac chapter in a book about the 1960s and 70s in California and America. But I just don't think that he has generated the strongest understanding of the material, and it's a very general commentary. And he's going to go into the category of perhaps it's not the worst book in the world, maybe it doesn't even hurt the Zodiac mystery that much, but it also hasn't helped an enormous amount. And if you've read the book, you can give your ideas in the comment section down below. If you would like to challenge me on anything I said in that little brief introduction, I would love to hear from you. And normally, the Anything Goes Friday segment is devoted to subjects outside of the Zodiac Killer. And in the future, I'll be doing some book discussions on Illusion of Justice and Convicting Avery, talking about the story of Making a Murderer and the imprisonment of Stephen Avery and his nephew Brendan Dassey for the 2005 murder of Teresa Hallback. So please look out for those recordings in the near future. And of course, if you would like to support any of these efforts, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88. There's a link to that in the description box. And anyone who makes a contribution or a donation to support this program will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. Because this is a part 2, I also want to pay attention to something that was shared in part 1. After the Lake Herman Road murders, which I was just discussing, the Zodiac Killer said in a letter that he was able to commit the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen by taping a pencil flashlight to the gun barrel, and that's how he was able to shoot in the dark. And what he would do is the pencil flashlight would create a light cone, and there's a black spot in the center of the light cone or beam of light that emits from the flashlight, and he just had to aim for the central black spot, and then he could shoot accurately. And Jarett Kobek was disputing that, saying that that phraseology came from a 1967 article that had been published in a magazine that was actually written by the creator of Perry Mason, and it was very similar wording. And a lot of you guys in the comment section were pointing out, saying, hey, now wait a second, just because it has similar wording doesn't mean that the Zodiac didn't actually do that. It doesn't mean he read the magazine article and had the idea but didn't actually put it into action. He could have done both. And I want to share something else, though, that was from the last episode, and that was that Kobek also disputes it for a more important reason, saying that based on the angle and the distance from the flashlight to the target, the size and width of the black dot in the center, or the dark circle in the center of the light cone, would be varying in size. So he didn't think that it would be possible to shoot accurately at someone who was running away with a pencil flashlight taped to a gun barrel. But I want to point out that multiple people have written into the comments section here on BlackBoxOnlineRadio saying that they have done this in their own hunting experiences. One of them would be Colonel Reb, who responded to last Wednesday's episode on part 1 on the discussion about Motor Spirit. by saying that he has done this firsthand to kill a skunk that was on his property with a flashlight taped to the gun barrel and had a similar result. And yes, indeed, it does work accurately. So I think that's where I will leave it there. And I won't dispute you guys who have tried this out firsthand and you say that it works. I will believe you. But to give an example of something that I can be critical of in the book, there are parts of it that are almost shock value minus the value, such as page 119, where it says, "The smartest move Zodiac ever made was killing someone in San Francisco." And at this point, I know you're probably thinking, okay, that's just something that's supposed to catch your attention before he starts a new chapter. Chapter 7, actually. Yeah, I don't even really care too much. As I said, shock value minus the value. And there are going to be a lot of things in this book that are going to do that exact same arrangement. But as far as the actual claims that are discussed here in Motor Spirit, page 124, Jarett Kobek asks some challenge questions to the reader, and you guys know that I can't resist those most of the time. And they said the first one is a very general one. It says, "What keeps you from doing what you want?" I'll respond to that one later. The next question, though, is, "What keeps you busy on Independence Day and a holiday Sunday?" The Zodiac Killer would commit his second crime on July 4th of 1969, murdering Darlene Ferrin, and the Zodiac almost exclusively worked close to holidays and definitely on weekends. Nights, evenings, weekends, holidays, that's what's going on with the Zodiac Killer. And the final challenge question is proposed by Jarett Kobek is, could Zodiac be a man with a family? And this ties in directly to a psychological profile that was created by Sharon Hagen, which is not mentioned in this book, but she said, as a psychological profiler, the Zodiac appears to be a single person, not part of the group murder theory or anything, but one person who had stable employment working a 9-to-5 job, and he had his free time on nights, evenings, weekends, and holidays. That's why the crimes were committed that way. And even being a father and a family man, that would mean that he would have also had responsibilities with his kids, or those were the only times that he could get away from the family. And that would just be something, though, that would keep him in those places, because that's what it says. What keeps you busy on Independence Day and a holiday Sunday? What he's suggesting, Kobek is in this book, is that family members, gatherings, and going out to do this and that with people, and maybe he made some excuse on the 4th of July not to go watch fireworks with his wife and kids. Now, there are people who would absolutely dispute this, and I think they're the ones like Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, who states that he is not convinced at all that the Zodiac was married. He views the Zodiac Killer as someone who was just a completely antisocial male, who was not antisocial in the clinical sense, like he's against the social norm, but he's also asocial, like opposed to social behavior, and just someone who perhaps didn't even have the social skills to get married, let alone have any major group of friends. Dr. Todd Grande also said something very similar in his assessment of the Zodiac Killer, when he suggested that the Zodiac was someone who had 9-to-5 employment, or thereabouts. It could be 8-to-4, 10-to-6, an ordinary job during business hours. But what Todd Grande said was, in his psychological profile, he thought the Zodiac Killer worked a solitary job, someone who was just very, very gentle to the public, but spent a lot of his time alone because he just could not interact with the challenges of society, and that would include trying to get married. But the final question, which Kobek actually asked first, but I want to respond to this one last, because it's a little bit more theoretical. What keeps you doing from what you want? What keeps you from doing what you want? There, I got the words that time, even though I'm reading it. Sometimes you read too fast and words get all twisted around. What keeps you from doing what you want? And you can respond to this challenge question in the comment section down below. Just to give an honest answer, punishment. I think punishment is perhaps one of the biggest ones. Then the second one would be like moral principles. The third one would be things like legal codes. But with punishment, I think a lot of people will not behave in a certain way if they believe that they will be punished for their actions. But that's the plan of the Zodiac. He doesn't think that he's going to get caught. He's even writing taunting letters. After the murder of Darlene Ferrin, he makes his first communication, which is a phone call saying that he is the one responsible for the murder of their two kids in a brown car that were shot with a 9mm Luger, and he's the one who did it. Then he goes on to say that he is going to announce himself in a couple of letters that come in July 31st and August 4th, August 4th being the publication date. In the July 31st letter that was mailed to the 3 different newspapers, he's just stating the facts that only he and the police knows. Then on August 4th of 1969, we see the name Zodiac. Someone is very clearly thinking that they will not get caught. As I said, though, there are parts of the book that I do find intriguing and entertaining, and particularly, Kobek is good at stringing together some sentences. One of them in Chapter 8 reads, "One can't spell Caligula without Cali, C-A-L-I. It's good stuff, I kid thee not. In Kobek's book, he talks about the murder of Richard Redditich from June of 1970, and that is on page 192. And I would actually like to save some of that material for next week's Zodiac Monday. Every Monday is Zodiac Monday here on this channel. And on the very next page, this leads into a discussion about the Kathleen Johns incident. And it talks about the attempted abduction of a woman and her child off of Highway Route 132 in Northern California. This occurred on March 22nd, 1970. Kathleen Johns was able to get away from the perpetrator, but some people are convinced, to this day, that he was indeed the Zodiac. And my comments in response aren't so much about anything to do with Jarett Kobek's analysis or anything, but in this book, he does provide the text to the majority of letters that he's discussing. Like if he's making some comments about one of the letters, he'll post the text in its entirety. On the one hand, he is using a lot of filler from things that he has not written himself. On the other hand, it actually does provide somewhat of an insightful resource for people who are reading and following along. And firstly, the Zodiac says something about the Kathleen Johns incident. This is on page 195. This is the Zodiac speaking. "I'm rather unhappy because you people will not wear some nice Zodiac buttons. So I now have a little list, starting with the woman and her baby that I gave an interesting ride for a couple hours one evening a few months back, that ended in my burning her car where I found them." And this is my own statement, because what Jarett Kobek also does is highlight that after the murder of Paul Stein on October 11th of 1969, the Zodiac says that he is going to announce his crimes in different ways, or he's not going to announce his crimes in the same way as he has done in the past. He is going to make them look like routine robberies, killings of anger, and a few fake accidents. And I began to think about that as I read it out, partnered with this piece of Zodiac text here on 195, talking about the Kathleen Johns incident. And to me, I don't think that the Kathleen Johns incident would fall into any of those categories. A routine robbery? Absolutely not. As the Zodiac even says, he burned her car, he didn't take it with him. Killing of anger? Well, for starters, she wasn't murdered. Was he actually trying to make it look like a killing of anger? Not quite. It was a premeditated and calculated abduction. This is the one where the perpetrator is saying that, "Hey, your wheel is wobbling," and she pulls over, and then the man loosens the bolts on the wheel, and then she tries to drive away, and the wheel falls off, and he says, "Oh, I guess it's worse than I thought." And then, ultimately, she gets in his car with her infant, and they're driving around for a while, and she's able to get out and run away. There are two major theories. One of them is that the Kathleen Johns incident was the real Zodiac killer, and that he was trying to plan a crime committed by fire. The other one is that Kathleen Johns just made up the whole story. It was an insurance fraud. She didn't even have car insurance, but her car broke down, and maybe she had been thinking about it for a while, and she or somebody who was involved with it set the car on fire, and she thought maybe the media coverage surrounding her incident would have turned into some type of cash cow, or she did it for profit. She thought that some way, somehow, she would gain financial rewards for saying that the Zodiac attacked her, because after she gets to the police station, she points to a wanted poster on the wall and says, "That's the man, that's him." And it was the Zodiac. This is partnered with a Zodiac communication that comes months later, saying that, much as I just read off, that he took credit for giving a ride to a woman and her baby and setting the car on fire. What do you think about the Kathleen Johns incident? And you can let's see what you guys vote for. Is it genuinely the Zodiac? Is it the insurance fraud? Or is it something just different? Was she actually abducted by somebody and there was a real perpetrator? She didn't try to do anything illegal at all. And then the ultimate result was that different male burned the car, and then the Zodiac learned about it from the news coverage, because that's what people try to say in terms of a skeptical response to Kathleen Johns. Everything that the Zodiac just said here was available in the papers, and he's also not providing the details that only he and the police would know. And do you also think that there's any chance that the Kathleen Johns incident is not authentic because of what the Zodiac said he was going to do? Stage his killings like routine robberies, killings of anger, and a few fake accidents. Because you couldn't even really call it an accident. It was a sabotage and killing of anger. That suggests to me like making it look like two people, like a husband and wife, were in an argument. And you might be thinking, okay, Ned, you're playing too many games with the language. That's obviously just stretching the truth. The Zodiac just means that he's going to commit the crimes in a different way. If you want to say that as your response in the comment section down below, please share anything that you would like. All is welcome. But to move on with Jarett Kobek's book, after discussing the crimes of the 1960s and 70s, beginning with 1968 and going into 1970, Jarett Kobek goes back in time and talks about the murder of Cheri Jo Bates from 1966. She was murdered on October 30th of that year, and she was very viciously attacked, and there was a knife that was involved that was almost used to decapitate her, but really quite different than a lot of the Zodiac crimes of the later 1960s. But what Jarett Kobek tries to do is say more or less the Bates connection to the Zodiac killer mystery has been put to an end. And the reason why he said that is something that I thought was very strange. And that is that after the murder of Cheri Jo Bates, there were pieces of writing that were mailed in. The Riverside Confession in November of '66, the desktop poem, which was not mailed but discovered in December of 1966, and then the 3 letters that say, either Bates had to die, there will be more, or she had to die, there will be more, and they are signed with a Z that has a squiggle on top, or a curly Q, if you will, and one of them says she had to die, there will be more, because it was mailed to her father, Joseph Bates. But I would like to go to page 233 in the book that says, Addendum. The preceding chapter was written in April of 2021. On August 2nd of 2021, the Riverside Police Department announced that it had verified the authorship of the 3 Bates Had to Die letters. Investigation of Bates's murder is now formally severed from any attempt to find Zodiac. In 2016, the RPD received an anonymous letter, and its author stated that in their turbulent youth, they composed the Bates Had to Die letters. DNA was extracted from a stamp on the 2016 envelope. Through genetic genealogy, it was marked to the sender. He was not Zodiac. The preceding chapter has been left unmodified, as it now proves an underlying thesis of this book, that the authenticity of Zodiac correspondences can be determined through analysis of the greater context and each letter's contents. The importance of the RPD statement cannot be overstated. From Paul Avery's original reporting, it's clear that Cheri Jo Bates was moved into the category of Zodiac, or into the category of Zodiac victim on the basis of the Bates had to die letters. The article in question, dated November 16th of 1970, contains a supporting point, and before I get into any of that material, I am somebody who has spoken very publicly on this particular subject, and I would agree with some of the points in this paragraph, or paragraphs plural of text. You guys who have followed the show know that I do not believe the Zodiac killer was involved with the murder of Cheri Jo Bates. I also accept that the statement that the hoaxer or the prankster wrote the letters could be accurate, but I think that we are arriving at a similar conclusion for some very different reasons. And have you ever heard this other expression that it's not only the conclusions that you reach, but it's also the methods that you use to reach these conclusions? Number one, that there is contents of the letter are providing the greater context. Let me just read that sentence one more time. The underlying thesis of this book, that the authenticity of Zodiac correspondences can determine through analysis of the greater context and each letter's contents. Well, it isn't even so much the letter that he's talking about, it's the stamp. And also, I think that any attempt to link the Zodiac to the murder of Cheri Jo Bates has been severed, like cut off, like ended. I don't think that that is true at all. That is the more important part. And even somebody like me who doesn't think the Zodiac murdered Cheri Jo Bates still has to admit that it's an unsolved murder case. And if it turns out that a link could be established between Cheri Jo and the Zodiac killer, I would not dispute the result, because a fact is a fact. And because it is unsolved, who is he to say that Cheri Jo's murderer and the Zodiac have been completely identified as different people, based solely on someone who wasn't the killer writing these 3 letters? I think that it's a premature statement. And also, there are a lot of people out there who disagree with both Kobek and me about the Bates had to die letters and them not being authentic. One of them is Ray Grant, author of Zodiac Killer Solved, as well as the novel Zodiac Killer Dreams. And I hope that I interpret his statement correctly. What Ray Grant has said in the comment section of BlackBoxOnlineRadio is that the RPD intentionally distorted the facts in their press release about the Bates had to die letters. For example, he said that they simply stated that somebody wrote a letter admitting to fabricating the letters. They tracked that person down, and he was determined not to have been the killer. And that's it. That's it. That doesn't actually mean whether or not he wrote the letters. It's just they took the DNA from the stamp from the 2016 admission of guilt, and they located that person, and he was determined not to have been the Zodiac and not to have been the murderer. That doesn't mean that he actually wrote the letters or not. So how can they put so much weight in that confession? Well, it's a good question, but if I had to make a determination now, I would still stand by the claim that the Zodiac and the murderer of Cheri Jo Bates did not write the letters, and I lean toward the story of the prankster or hoaxer doing it. I'm only saying the word prankster because a similar word was used when they broke this news story about this man coming forward. And the only reason why I could think that he chose 2016 to reveal the admission of guilt in this case was it was 50 years after Cheri Jo's murder. Other people dispute the fact that he actually wrote the letters, the Bates had to die letters, because they said the statute of limitations would have been passed like well before that. He didn't need to wait 50 years to come forward, and he wouldn't have been facing any crimes at all, or any charges for this crime at all, like obstruction of justice and so on, forgery, and fabricating evidence. But what do you think? Do you believe that Jarett Kobek is right that the investigation of Bates's murder is now formally severed from any attempt to find Zodiac? And I should also point out that When I was reading the book America's Jack the Ripper, written by Soren Korsgaard, I first encountered a statement that referenced a press release from 1982 in which Riverside PD said that they were distancing themselves from the Zodiac killer mystery, meaning that it wasn't the Zodiac. And I had the opportunity to ask questions about this in a recent chat discussion, and the response that I got was that not quite, because Tom Voigt posted the press release that was issued by RPD back in 1982, and it doesn't exactly say that they are going to completely end any type of Zodiac connection or that there's no Zodiac connection available. What it says is they want to focus their investigation on their prime suspect, Bob Barnett, who is not a Zodiac killer suspect, but he was Sherry Jo Bates' ex-boyfriend, and as Ken Maines revealed on his channel Unsolved No More, he has a particular theory that Sherry Jo and Bob Barnett were not in a formal relationship, but they had a very casual and intimate affair that was going on, while Sherry Jo had a long-distance relationship with somebody named Dennis Highland. And that Dennis proposed to Sherry Jo and that he accepted, and this set Bob Barnett off in a particular rage. But Bob Barnett's DNA was not found at the scene of the crime. Someone else's was. In short, his DNA did not match the forensic evidence, partnered with a psychological statement that was made by Ken Maines, author of Unsolved No More, as well as the host of that program, and that was that Bob Barnett would have had to have committed the murder of Sherry Jo Bates and then gone to work that day doing the night shift on Halloween morning, and nobody noticed anything strange about him. So they say 60 years later, 50 years later, 56 years later, and we don't always have the ability to go back in time. And that'll be the final piece of criticism that I will give to this book here, Motor Spirit by Jarett Kobek. There is one section in the book where he says that certain people who were reporting on the Zodiac killer case in the 1960s didn't have 5 decades to sift through the material, so they didn't have the ability to get the narrative right. And it really is quite shocking to hear him say that, because as I said from the beginning, he completely made up details about the Lake Herman Road murders, that David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen are getting rough and passionate and intimate in the car before they are murdered, and that he called it heavy petting. And my only response to that is, dude, that's totally bogus, if we're going to get into our vibes, because there are the reasons that I've stated previously, but you guys have to understand, I didn't know that much about high school relationships when I was in high school. Yeah, but there were other people in the world than just me, and from the understanding that I had from having friends who were in relationships, just because two people are going out on a date does not mean that they were excessively intimate or even intimate at all. I mean, people at the high school age don't always have the most forward relationships, and a lot of those high school relationships were just holding hands in the hallway, going to different places like eating in a restaurant together, and maybe some very brief kissing. The whole point is that certain levels of intimacy were not present, nor were they required to be constituted as a relationship. The only thing that determined if somebody were boyfriend and girlfriend was whether or not they chose to use the title, and usually there was just a little bit of affection that would be necessary to constitute a real relationship. The whole point is, just because these two teenagers aged 17 and 16 were sitting alone in a car, it does not mean that they were doing any type of heavy petting, as the way Jarett Kobek was talking about in the book. Pure assumption on his part. So it was really quite shocking that he had the nerve to go and criticize other people for getting anything incorrect about the story when he openly fabricated details on his own. And that really brings us to the end of the discussion on Motor Spirit by Jarett Kobek. Overall, though, as I said, there are parts of the book that are rather interesting, and if you do want to read a Zodiac book that just lists the text of most of the Zodiac letters which are discussed in the book, this one does succeed in that angle. If you're also just curious about the 1960s and 70s, and you don't mind if there's somebody going off on different particular tangents about other subjects, then this book would definitely be for you. If you really wanted to focus on Zodiac material, I think that it would go off in a lot of bizarre challenges. I thought one of the more peculiar tangents was when he started talking about Osama bin Laden and bin Laden's new plans for attacking America after 9/11. I was like, okay, dude, this is almost just going a little bit too far, because not only is that not Zodiac related, it's not even related to the contemporary time frame. And of course, he has some way of tying it together, but this is a book that is going to cover many different subjects. It is a very general read, and it seems like someone who has just explored the Zodiac material a little bit, but is definitely not going to be the most groundbreaking expert in the world, or not the person that you would want testifying at a trial on the ins and outs of the Zodiac killer case. But if you've read the book Motor Spirit by Jarett Kobek, you can weigh in the comment section down below, share anything that you would like, and you can also tune in every Monday for Zodiac Mondays on this channel, mostly done as the Zodiac Killer News Report these days. And feel free to visit some links in the description box. That's all for me now. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram. And I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.